Hey, it's a Helmet Collector here, and today's video we're going to take a look at the two-panel death card of Kajetan Berghammer. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Have a nice photo of Kajetan up at the top there, and moving to the bottom. In Christian remembrance of Mr. Kajetan Berghammer, a mercenary son from Herbstheim in the parish of Hohenart, a Schutze in an infantry regiment, killed on September 15th, 1941 in the Soviet Union at the age of 20. Now, I will say, Soldner's son translates as mercenary son. I don't know if his father was actually a mercenary or if there's some other translation for that that's just not getting across. Now, something I learned recently is apparently in Bavaria and parts of Austria, if there's like a family estate, sometimes they'll have that listed on here. So it might not be a profession, it might be an estate named Soldner, possibly a pub, possibly a farm. It's kind of hard to tell. If anybody knows, I'd be curious to hear down below. Now, I did actually find a casualty record for Kajetan. He was born on December 28th, 1921 in Herbstheim, and was a member of the 13th Company of Infantry Regiment 54, which was part of Light Infantry Division 100, which later became the 100th Jaeger Division. Now, we've talked about the 100th Jaeger Division here on the channel a couple times. Jaeger roughly equates to hunter in German, so a Jaeger division is designed as like light infantry, right? They don't have as much heavy support equipment as a normal infantry division would. Therefore, they're able to move faster, go places that a heavier unit probably wouldn't be able to go, rougher terrain. But unlike the Gebirgsjägers that we've talked about many, many times on the channel, they weren't specialized in mountain warfare. So because they're missing the Gebirgs part on the name there. And per his casualty record, he died in the unit's field hospital in Kabeljetschok, which I can only find when I'm looking online related to this field hospital, but it should be somewhere in southern Ukraine, given the fact that he's probably buried in the Kropivnitsky military cemetery in the unknown soldiers section, but also because that's where the unit was fighting based on my research. I do actually have a unit history for the 100th Jaeger Division, which is Mit Tana und Eichenlaub, which I believe we've used once or twice on the channel. And in the unit history here, we actually do have a map of where they were fighting on the day that Kajetan was killed. Zoom out a little bit here. Yeah, 15th September 1941. Now, as you'll notice here, that village where he apparently died in the field hospital is not listed. That makes sense, as the field hospital will probably be at least a safe distance from the front line. But before we get into the actual account here, there's something I'd like to note. They mentioned multiple times in the account a VA. That's the acronym they're using. I'm not 100% sure what the VA is. Based off of the context, I believe that it is a Vermessungsabteilung, which would be a survey detachment. So basically a larger reconnaissance and force unit, I guess. I've never seen that used before, but it's the only abbreviation I could find in period documentation that kind of makes sense. If I'm wrong on that, please let me know. But we'll go ahead and get into it now. The next day, it was intended to send the VA northeast, initially taking Andreyevka in order to reconnoiter from there to the Poltava-Velichkovka railway line. The Verfolgungsgruppe Neidecker, reinforced infantry regiment 227, was to advance via Plaskoye, secure the crossing over the marsh section east of Plaskoye, and also reconnoiter to the railway line, while infantry regiment 54, with the attached Marschgruppe Eichstein, reinforced 4th Battery Artillery Regiment 83, was only supposed to follow via Liman and Plaskoye to Andreyevka. However, due to the difficult terrain, things turned out differently. The division assembled at the ordered time, 7:30 a.m. However, since the bridge east of Plaskoye proved barely passable, it could barely support a horse-drawn cart, a major traffic jam ensued. They now searched everywhere for crossings over the long, north-south running stretch of swamp to lose as little time as possible. At 12 p.m., the VA was finally able to cross the only slightly damaged bridge near Andreyevka, heading east, and received orders to capture the road and Hill 163.3 as soon as possible, where masses of Russians were streaming back to Poltava. Group Eichstein was brought up behind the VA as reinforcements. Infantry Regiment 54 was to advance first to Andreyevka and secure the north, while Infantry Regiment 227 was to cross the bridge 7 kilometers southeast of Plaskoye and reach Kalashniki. At 3 p.m., the enemy, supported by 6 tanks, attacked the 2nd Battalion of the 54th Infantry Regiment, which was securing the area north of Andreyevka, and was repulsed after 3 tanks were destroyed. At 5:15 p.m., the VA captured Hill 163.3, from which enemy troop movements could be observed on the road just north of the hill in the direction of Poltava. The heavy weapons therefore held out as long as there was still light for observation. Infantry Regiment 54 marched into the night and finally reached Kolvenchik, about 8 kilometers east of Andreyevka. The day had brought only 100 prisoners, besides the division's 3 destroyed tanks. So not as much detail as we're normally used to in these unit histories, but we do see that the 54th Infantry Regiment, which Kajetan was a part of, was heavily involved in the fighting that day. So likely he was wounded at some point in one of these actions, was taken back to the field hospital, and died there as a result. We do have several other references and death cards for the division in my collection. In the Gustav Hoffmann Shoe Company booklet, we have a reference to Peter Cole, who was an Oberfighter in the 9th Battery of Artillery Regiment 83 and was killed by an artillery shot to the head and both arms at Sloboda Novostolovka in Ukraine on October 11th, 1941. Fritz Neuhauser, who was a Krautfahrer in the Staff Company of Infantry Regiment 54 and was killed by a headshot at Vorkenyaya Busanovka, Russia on July 28th, 1942. Friedrich Kriel was an Oberfighter in the 12th Company of Jaeger Regiment 54 and died from blood poisoning after taking a shrapnel wound to the knee at Kantomarovka, Russia on September 8th, 1942. And finally, Xavier Bush was a Gefreiter in the 4th Company, which was the machine gun company of Jaeger Regiment 54, and died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen at Bobulinsky, Ukraine on April 16th, 1944. And moving out of the bottom of the card here. Duty called me out to war. With God, I left my homeland. I thought of you, dear parents and siblings, on and on, even though I was in a foreign place, and I looked forward to seeing you again when the war and storm were over. But the Lord wanted it differently and took me away earlier. Now I rest in foreign soil and am in God's house. I know nothing of war and earthly suffering, and am free from all worries. Therefore, dearest parents and siblings, do not weep. Dying for the fatherland is a sacred duty. And moving to the back of the card here, we have St. Francis, pray for us. Blessed are those who die in the Lord. Their good works follow them. So yeah, overall, really interesting card. It's always nice when we have the unit history. We're able to learn a little bit more about what was going on in the division at the time of a soldier's death. And in this case, we see several very clear references to the 54th Infantry Regiment being involved in pretty heavy fighting on the day that Kajetan was killed. But yeah, overall, really interesting card. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment down below. Love hearing from you. Thank you all for watching. Happy collecting, and I'll see you all again very soon.